For 19 years, Jonathan Bell believed his life had been paid for by strangers. That was the sentence he carried with him every time he closed a business deal, every time he signed a check with a hand that once could not afford a proper meal. Somewhere out there, he believed, was a church, a group of quiet donors, a scholarship fund that had reached across an ocean 19 years ago and pulled a dying boy off a hospital bed in a foreign country. He did not know their names. He had tried to find them once and given up. He told himself the best way to honor them was to become the kind of man who could one day give to others the way they had given to him. He was 37 now. He owned a logistics company in the capital. He wore tailored suits that fit shoulders that had once been so thin his mother could count his ribs through his shirt. He had come home in a black SUV with tinted windows and a driver named Samuel, and a small leather envelope on the seat beside him that held the deed to a new house he had bought for his parents. 3 bedrooms, a porch, a vegetable garden his mother had always dreamed of, a guest room for the grandchildren he did not yet have. Jonathan had not told them he was coming. He wanted to see their faces when he pulled up. He wanted his mother to drop whatever she was holding and press her hand to her mouth. He wanted his father to try not to cry and fail at it. That was the picture he had held in his mind through every late night, every canceled flight, every meeting where men who did not know his story assumed he had always been this Jonathan, the one in the good shoes. But when the SUV turned off the paved road and began climbing the dust track toward the old quarry, Jonathan felt something inside him tighten. He had not been back to this exact stretch of land in almost 12 years. His parents, Edward and Linda Bell, had always come to visit him in the city. Always his mother would arrive with a small bag and a jar of the pepper sauce he loved, and his father would sit stiffly on the leather sofa as if it might scold him for touching it. Jonathan had offered 100 times to send a car for them, to fly them out, to put them up in a hotel by the sea. They had always refused with the same soft, tired smile. "We are comfortable, son. Do not worry about us here." He had believed them. Why wouldn't he? They were his parents, and he had been so busy building the life they told him he deserved. Now the SUV slowed. Samuel glanced at him in the mirror. "Sir," he said carefully, "the address you gave. This is it." Jonathan looked out the window. For a long moment, he did not understand what he was seeing. There was no house. Not the small brick house with the blue door he remembered. Not the tin roof his father had patched every rainy season. Not the mango tree his mother had planted the year he was born. All of it was gone. In its place, at the edge of the old quarry, stood a leaning wooden shack. 2 rooms, maybe. Walls of mismatched planks. A roof held down by stones and one rusted sheet of corrugated iron. A cooking fire smoked in a small pit outside the doorway. A single plastic chair sat empty in the dust. Jonathan opened the door of the SUV before Samuel could stop him. His polished shoes hit the dry ground with a soft sound. He did not feel his legs. He did not feel the sun. He only felt one word rising inside him, cold and sharp. Robbed, Jonathan stood in the dust with the leather envelope forgotten in his hand. The deed to the new house, 3 bedrooms, a porch, a garden, suddenly felt like a cruel joke pressed against his chest. He had come to lift his parents up. Instead, he had arrived to find them buried alive in a place that looked like it belonged to strangers who had lost everything in a fire. Then the shack door opened. His mother stepped out first. Linda Bell, 64 years old, in a faded blue dress Jonathan did not recognize. Her hair was fully white now. She had lost weight. But her face, that face he had memorized as a child while she read to him in the evenings, was the same. She stopped in the doorway when she saw the SUV, and then she saw him, and her hand went to her mouth just as he had imagined. Only she was not smiling. She was crying. "Jonathan," she whispered, and the word cracked in half. His father came out behind her. Edward Bell, 68, thinner than Jonathan had ever seen him, wearing a shirt so patched at the elbows it looked like a quilt. He froze when he saw his son. His mouth opened once and closed. He did not step forward. He looked down at the ground as if he had been caught doing something shameful. That look. That was what broke Jonathan. He had seen his father angry. He had seen him tired. He had seen him proud on the day Jonathan graduated. He had never once in 37 years seen Edward Bell look ashamed. "Mama," Jonathan said, and his voice did not sound like his own. "Papa, what is this?" Linda tried to smile. She tried so hard that Jonathan almost could not bear to watch her. "You came," she said. "You came all this way. Come inside, son, come inside. I will make you tea." "Mama, what happened to the house? Come inside first." "Mama, please." "Jonathan, the neighbors." He looked around. There were no neighbors. There were no houses at all this far up the quarry road. Only dust and rock, and the low wind that came off the pit. But he understood. She did not want to talk out here where the sky could listen. She wanted him under a roof, even a roof like that one, before the truth came out. He followed them inside. The shack had one main room, a small iron bed pushed against one wall with a mosquito net tied above it, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a shelf holding 4 plates, 3 cups, and a small clay pot, a framed photograph on the wall, and Jonathan's breath caught when he saw it. It was his graduation picture, the one from the university abroad, him in his gown, thin and grinning, his hair too long, holding a rolled certificate. It hung there in a cheap wooden frame, the only decoration in the entire house, and it had been dusted so carefully that the glass shone. Jonathan stared at that photograph and felt something crumble inside his chest. He sat down heavily in one of the chairs. Linda began fussing at once with the small kerosene stove, pouring water, reaching for tea leaves in a tin. Edward stood by the doorway with his hands behind his back, like a man waiting for a verdict. "How long?" Jonathan said quietly. "Have you been living here?" Neither of them answered. "How long?" Linda's hands trembled around the tea tin. "A long time, son." "How long, Mama?" She would not turn around. Edward finally spoke. His voice was low and tired and did not try to be strong. "Since you were 19, Jonathan." Jonathan looked up. His father was still staring at the floor. 19, the year of the surgery. The year the scholarship fund had appeared out of nowhere to save his life. The cold, sharp word came back. But it was no longer robbed. It was why. The kettle began to whistle, and Linda kept her back to him. Jonathan understood, in the way sons sometimes understand their mothers without words, that she was buying herself time. She was pouring the tea slowly because if she turned around, she would have to look at him, and if she looked at him, she would have to answer the question hanging in the air. Edward was still standing by the door. He had not moved. His hands were still behind his back. There was something in the way he held himself that reminded Jonathan of a man standing before a judge, waiting to hear the sentence he already knew was coming. "Papa," Jonathan said. "Sit down." "I am fine, son. Papa, please." Edward crossed the small room slowly and lowered himself into the other chair. Up close, in the dim light, Jonathan could see how thin his father's wrists had become. He could see the small tremor in the left hand, the one that had held a hammer for 40 years. He could see a scar on Edward's forehead he did not remember from before. "When did you fall?" Jonathan asked quietly. Edward touched the scar as if he had forgotten it was there. 2 years ago. I slipped near the quarry edge. It is nothing. 2 years ago. I said it is nothing." Linda finally set the tea down on the table, 3 chipped cups. She poured for Jonathan first, then Edward, then herself. Her hands shook so badly that some of the tea spilled onto the wood. She wiped it with the edge of her dress and sat down. She did not lift her cup. She only wrapped her hands around it as if she were trying to warm them from something colder than the shack. Jonathan looked at both of them. For a moment, he could not speak. The rage he had felt outside, standing in the dust, had been simple. Someone had done this to them. Someone had cheated them, taken their house, driven them to this place. That rage had a direction. It had a target. It was almost comforting. But sitting across from his parents now, watching his mother's hands tremble around a cracked cup, Watching his father stare into his tea like a man who had already confessed and was only waiting to be asked, Jonathan felt the rage begin to slide sideways. Something was wrong with the shape of it. This did not look like the aftermath of a robbery. This looked like the aftermath of a decision. He set the leather envelope on the table between them. "I came to give you this," he said. Linda looked at it. Her eyes filled again, but she did not touch it. "What is it, son?" "A house. In the city. 3 bedrooms. A garden. It is already in your names. I bought it 3 months ago. I was going to surprise you." Edward closed his eyes. Jonathan waited. He waited for one of them to reach for the envelope, to weep, to thank him, to break the way he had imagined they would break. That was the scene he had rehearsed in his head for a decade. His mother's hand pressed to her mouth, his father trying not to cry and failing, both of them saying, "At last, you saved us, son." Neither of them moved. Linda finally spoke, and her voice was so soft Jonathan had to lean forward to hear it. "Jonathan, take it back." He stared at her. "What?" "Take the house back, son. Please, we cannot accept it." "Mama, what are you saying?" She looked at him then, and her eyes were wet and steady and full of something Jonathan did not yet understand. It was not pride, it was not shame, it was something older and heavier than both. "We do not deserve a house from you, Jonathan," she whispered. "We already took too much." Jonathan did not sleep that night. His parents had refused to let him drive them anywhere. They had refused the hotel he offered in the nearest town. They had refused even to let him send Samuel back to the city for proper bedding. Linda had made up a pallet on the floor with a folded blanket and an old cushion, and she had insisted, with a firmness Jonathan had not heard from her in years, that this was where he would sleep tonight if he insisted on staying. He had insisted. Samuel was sent to sleep in the SUV with instructions to lock the doors and open the windows a crack for air. Now the shack was quiet except for the small sounds of an old house that was not really a house. The wind pushing at a loose plank, a cricket somewhere near the doorway. His father's slow, uneven breathing from the iron bed. His mother's silence, which Jonathan knew from childhood was the sound she made when she was awake and pretending not to be. "We already took too much." He turned the words over in his mind the way a man turns a stone he has picked up from a strange beach, trying to understand what it is made of. Took too much of what? From whom? He had sent them money every month for 15 years. He had begged them to accept more, to move to the city, to at least install proper plumbing in the old house. They had refused everything. And now the old house was gone, and they were living at the edge of a quarry in a place a stray dog would think twice about, and his mother was telling him they had taken too much. By the time the first gray light came through the gaps in the planks, Jonathan had made a decision. Someone had done this to them. He was sure of it now. Whatever his mother had said in that soft, broken voice, whatever guilt she seemed to be carrying, she was protecting somebody. That was what Linda Bell did. She protected people. She had spent her whole life doing it. She had protected Jonathan from the knowledge of how poor they had been when he was small. She had protected Edward from knowing how many nights she went without dinner so he could eat. She was protecting someone now. Jonathan was going to find out who. He waited until his mother was outside at the cooking fire before he went to his father. Edward was sitting up in the bed, slowly buttoning his shirt with fingers that did not quite obey him. Jonathan sat on the edge of the mattress. The frame creaked under him. "Papa," he said, "I need you to tell me what happened to the house." Edward's fingers stopped on a button. "We sold it, son." "To who?" "It does not matter." "It matters to me." Edward looked up. His eyes were the same eyes Jonathan remembered from childhood, dark and patient. The eyes of a man who had spent his life carrying things heavier than himself and never complaining about the weight. But there was something new in them this morning, a tiredness that went past the body. "Jonathan," he said, "some things a man does in his life he does not want to explain. Not because he is ashamed, because the explaining makes it smaller than it was. Papa, please, let it rest, son. I cannot let it rest. Look at where you are living. We are alive. We are together. That is enough. It is not enough. Edward closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, he reached out and put his hand on Jonathan's knee. The tremor was there again. Jonathan felt it through the fabric of his trousers. "Go home, son," his father said gently. "Go back to your life." That was the whole point. Jonathan did not go home. He drove into town instead. The town had grown in the years Jonathan had been away, but not by much. A new petrol station stood where the old market used to be. The bank had a fresh coat of paint. The single traffic light at the crossroads still flickered between yellow and red, as if it had never quite made up its mind. Jonathan asked Samuel to park near the post office and wait. He walked first to the office of a lawyer named Peter Akabe, whose name he remembered from a signboard he had passed as a boy. The signboard was still there, faded but standing. Inside, the lawyer was older, grayer, and slower to rise from his desk, but he recognized the Bell name the moment Jonathan spoke it. "Edward Bell's son," Peter said, taking Jonathan's hand in both of his. "My God. Look at you." "I need your help," Jonathan said. "Someone took my parents' house. I want to find out who, and I want it back." Peter's smile faded. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, and Jonathan sat. "Tell me everything you know." Jonathan told him about the shack, about the missing brick house with the blue door, about his father's refusal to explain, about his mother saying they had already taken too much. Peter listened without interrupting, occasionally making a note on a yellow pad with a pen that leaked slightly at the tip. When Jonathan finished, Peter set the pen down. "Jonathan," he said carefully, "before we spend your money hunting a thief, may I suggest something?" "What?" "Let me pull the land records first. The district office keeps everything. If your parents' house was taken by fraud, the record will show it. If it was sold, the record will show that too. We should know what we are looking at before we accuse anyone." Jonathan agreed. He gave Peter a retainer that was more than the lawyer had probably seen in a year, and he asked him to move quickly. Peter promised results within the week. Then Jonathan began the second part of his hunt. He visited his father's brother first. Uncle Marcus lived on the far side of town in a modest concrete house with chickens in the yard and a satellite dish on the roof. Marcus was 71, a retired school teacher, and he had been close to Edward his whole life. If anyone knew the truth, Jonathan thought, it would be him. But Marcus, when Jonathan sat him down and told him what he had found, only stared at his hands. "I do not know, son," the old man said. "I asked your father the same question years ago. He would not tell me. Your mother would not tell me. I stopped asking because I saw it hurt them. You have no idea where the money went?" "None, Uncle Marcus." "Please, if you know something." Marcus looked up, and Jonathan saw that the old man's eyes were wet. "Jonathan, I love your father like my own breath. If I knew, I would tell you. I do not know. Nobody in this family knows. Whatever your parents did with that house, they did it alone, and they did it quietly, and they have carried it for 19 years, without letting one of us in on it." Jonathan visited 3 more relatives that day. His mother's sister, a cousin who had been close to Linda in their youth, an older neighbor from the old street who had known his parents for 40 years. He asked each of them the same questions. He watched their faces for the small tells he had learned to read across boardroom tables. A flicker in the eye. A hesitation before an answer. A hand that moved too quickly to a cup of water. He found nothing. Not one of them was hiding anything. By the time he returned to the SUV that evening, Jonathan Bell had a new and terrible feeling growing in his chest. The thief he was hunting might not exist. Peter Akabe called 3 days later. Jonathan was in the shack when the phone rang. He had spent those 3 days doing what his parents would allow him to do, which was very little. He had bought groceries and pretended they were gifts a client had insisted he take. He had brought a new mattress and told his mother it was left over from a hotel renovation his company had done. She had accepted these small lies the way she accepted the weather, with a soft sigh and no argument, because arguing would have required her to explain why she could not accept them. and she was not ready to explain anything. The phone buzzed in his pocket. Jonathan stepped outside, past the cooking fire, past the plastic chair, and walked toward the edge of the quarry where the signal was better. "Peter, Jonathan, I have the records. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "Tell me now." There was a long pause on the line. "I think you should come in, son. Peter, please, tell me now." Peter exhaled. Jonathan could hear the sound of paper being turned on the other end. "The house was not stolen, Jonathan. It was sold. Legally, properly signed by both of your parents in front of a notary." "When?" "That is the part I want you to sit down for." "Peter, the sale was registered on the 14th of March, 19 years ago. The farmland behind it, the 2 hectares your grandfather left to your father, was sold the same week, registered on the 18th, and there is a third record here, filed with the Goldsmiths Registry the same month. Your mother sold her dowry gold. All of it. 16 pieces. The bracelets, the chain, the earrings your father gave her when they married. Everything." Jonathan did not answer. He was standing at the edge of the quarry, and the wind was moving across the pit, and somewhere very far away a bird was calling. And he could hear all of these things with a strange, terrible clarity, as if the world had turned up its own volume to make sure he did not miss what came next. "Peter," he said. "What was the date again?" "The 14th of March, 19 years ago." Jonathan closed his eyes. He knew that date. He knew it the way a man knows the date of his own birth. It was the date written on a hospital discharge summary he still kept in a folder in his desk drawer in the city. It was the date on the letter from the surgeon that had said, in careful English, that the operation had been successful and that the patient was expected to recover fully. It was the date on the itemized bill he had once tried to calculate in his head and had stopped calculating because the number made no sense to a 19-year-old boy who had been living on rice and lentils in a foreign country. The 14th of March, 19 years ago. That was the week Jonathan Bell had almost died. He had been a student abroad on a partial scholarship, working nights at a warehouse to cover what the scholarship did not. He had collapsed one evening in the middle of a shift. Appendix, ruptured, peritonitis by the time they got him to the hospital. Emergency surgery. 4 days in intensive care. He had woken up on the 5th day to find a social worker sitting by his bed with a folder and a gentle expression. "Your bill has been taken care of, Mr. Bell. A church scholarship fund has covered everything. You do not owe anything. You should focus on getting well." He had asked the name of the fund. She had told him, kindly, that the donors preferred to remain anonymous. He had asked how they had known about him. She had said the fund worked through referrals. That was all. Jonathan opened his eyes. The wind was still moving across the quarry. "Peter," he said, and his voice did not sound like his own. "I need to see those records myself." Jonathan drove to the district land office that same afternoon. He did not tell his parents where he was going. He told them he had a meeting in town and would be back before sundown. His mother looked at him as he left, and there was something in her eyes that told him she already knew. She did not ask. She only pressed a small paper packet of roasted groundnuts into his hand at the door, the way she had when he was a boy going off to school, and turned back to her cooking fire before he could thank her. Peter met him at the entrance of the office. Together, they walked through a corridor that smelled of old paper and floor polish to a small back room where the clerk had pulled the files at Peter's request. 3 brown folders sat on the wooden table. Each one had a faded label written in a careful hand. Bell, Edward, residential property. Sold 14 March. Bell, Edward, agricultural holding. Sold 18 March. Bell, Linda, gold registry transaction. 21 March. Jonathan sat down slowly. Peter left him alone. He opened the first folder. Inside was a photocopy of the sale agreement for the small brick house with the blue door. The house where he had learned to walk. The house where his mother had planted the mango tree the year he was born. The buyer's name meant nothing to him. Some family from a neighboring district who had wanted a starter home. The signatures at the bottom were unmistakable. His father's slow, careful print, the L in Edward slightly larger than the other letters, the way it had always been. His mother's cursive, small and neat, the way she signed birthday cards. The sale price was low, lower than the house had been worth even 19 years ago. Someone who needed money quickly does not have time to bargain. He opened the second folder. The farmland. 2 hectares. His grandfather's land, the one Edward had inherited when he was 30. The one he used to walk Jonathan across on Sunday afternoons, pointing at the soil and saying, "This is yours one day, son. This is what we leave you." Sold, signed, registered. 4 days after the house. He opened the third folder. The goldsmith's ledger was older, the paper thinner. But the entry was there, in careful ink. 16 pieces of gold jewelry, sold by Linda Bell on the 21st of March. Beside each item was a small pencil drawing the goldsmith had made for his own records. A pair of earrings shaped like teardrops, a thin chain with a single pendant, 2 bracelets, a wedding bangle. Others, Jonathan recognized some of them from the photographs on his mother's dresser in the old house. She had worn the earrings to his primary school graduation. He remembered because she had bent down to kiss his forehead, and one of them had brushed against his cheek. He closed the folder. He sat very still for a long time. Peter came back in eventually and sat down across from him without speaking. That was one of the things Jonathan had come to understand about the old lawyer in these few days. He knew when to be quiet. "Peter," Jonathan said finally. His voice was flat. "The total, from all 3 sales, do we know what it came to?" Peter checked his notes. "Approximately $18,600 in the currency of the time. Give or take a few hundred, depending on the exchange rate that week." Jonathan nodded slowly. He knew that number too. It was almost exactly, to within a few $100s, the amount of the hospital bill the anonymous church scholarship fund had covered on his behalf 19 years ago. He did not cry. Not yet. Crying required a kind of release he could not access from where he was sitting. What he felt instead was something quieter and more terrible. It was the feeling of a man discovering, at 37 years old, that he had spent 19 years being wrong about the shape of his own life. There had been no church. There had been no strangers. There had only ever been Edward and Linda Bell, selling everything they owned in 1 week, without telling their son, so that he could live. Jonathan did not go back to the shack that evening. He asked Samuel to drive him to a small guest house on the edge of town, and he took a room without noticing what it looked like. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time with his phone in his hand and did not turn it on. When he finally lay down, he did not sleep. He watched the ceiling fan turn slowly and thought about a boy of 19 waking up in a hospital in a country whose language he had barely learned, being told by a kind woman with a folder that his life had been paid for by strangers who did not want to be named. He thought about the letters he had written home in the months after. He had told his parents about the surgery only when he was well enough to write. He had told them not to worry. He had told them that a church fund had taken care of the bill, that God had provided, that they should not be anxious about anything on his behalf. He remembered his mother's reply. He remembered the words exactly, because he had kept the letter for years in a shoebox under his bed and had reread it whenever he felt tempted to give up. "Praise God, my son. We knew he would not abandon you. Keep studying hard. Do not think of home. Think only of what is in front of you." She had written that letter. She had sat down at the small wooden table in the old brick house, or perhaps already in this shack. He did not yet know, and she had written those words to him with the same hand that had signed away her wedding gold 3 days earlier. Jonathan turned his face into the pillow. He did not cry the way he had expected to. He cried the way a man cries, when he understands, for the first time, that love can be a thing that hides itself so completely you spend your whole life believing you did it on your own. In the morning he called Peter. "I need to know one more thing." "Tell me." "The buyers. All 3 sales. The house, the land, the gold. I want to know who has them now. Jonathan, Peter, I want them back. All of it. Whatever it costs. I do not care. There was a pause. Son, Peter said carefully, the gold will be difficult. 19 years. Pieces get melted. Resold. Broken up. Then we find what we can. Start with the goldsmith. Start today. And the land? The land is the priority. The house too if the family will sell. Make them an offer they cannot refuse. Do it quietly. I do not want my parents to know what I am doing. They will find out eventually. Eventually is fine. Not yet. Jonathan drove back to the shack that afternoon. His mother was sitting outside on the plastic chair, shelling beans into a metal bowl. His father was inside reading a newspaper someone in town had given him 3 days ago. Jonathan sat down on the ground beside his mother's chair, the way he used to when he was a small boy, and he leaned his head against her knee. She did not say anything. She only put down the bowl of beans and rested her hand on his hair. Her hand was thinner than it had been in his memory. There were spots on it he did not remember. The wedding band that had once been there was gone, of course. Had been gone for 19 years. He had not noticed. He had not once, in all the visits she had made to him in the city, thought to look at his mother's hands and wonder where her ring had gone. He closed his eyes. Mama, he whispered. Shh, she said softly. It is all right, son. Whatever you know now. It is all right. She had known. Of course she had known. From the moment he arrived in the SUV with a leather envelope, she had known this day would come. She stroked his hair the way she had when he was small and had a fever. You were worth it, Jonathan, she said. Every piece, every stone, every plank of that old house. You were worth all of it. Do not carry it. Please. That is why we never told you. Jonathan stayed at the shack for another week. He told his company he was taking leave. He told his clients an old family matter had come up. He turned off his email and let Samuel drive back to the city to handle the things that could not be delayed. He wanted to be alone with his parents in this small place they had chosen and understand it properly before he did anything else. He learned things in that week that no folder in a district office could have told him. He learned that his father woke at 4 every morning to walk down to the quarry road and collect water from a pump a kilometer away, because the shack had no plumbing. He learned that his mother made bread twice a week in a small clay oven Edward had built with his own hands, and that she gave half of what she baked to a widow who lived on the other side of the ridge and had no family. He learned that his parents had been, in their quiet way, the small heart of this poor stretch of land for 19 years. People came to them, a young mother with a sick child, an old man who could not read his own letters, a boy who had run away from home and needed a meal before he went back to face his father. Edward and Linda Bell had lived here in a shack, and they had opened its door to anyone who knocked. Jonathan understood, slowly, that his parents had not been hiding in shame. They had been living, fully, quietly on the small piece of ground they had left after they had spent everything else on him. He also learned from a neighbor 2 ridges over that his father had worked at the quarry itself for the first 8 years after the sale, breaking rock. At 50 years old, then 51, 52. His father, who had been a carpenter his whole life, had broken rock at the quarry until his back gave out and he could not lift the hammer anymore. That was the year of the fall Jonathan had noticed, the scar on his forehead. His father had slipped one morning at the quarry edge because his legs had stopped being reliable, and he had come home bleeding, and Linda had cleaned the wound with a cloth and told him, gently, that it was time to stop. Jonathan sat outside the shack one evening after his mother had gone in to lie down. His father was beside him on a small wooden stool, watching the light fade over the pit. "Papa," Jonathan said. "Yes, son. Why did you not tell me any of it?" Edward looked out at the quarry for a long time before he answered. "Because you were 19, Jonathan. You had been sick. You had almost died. If you had known what we did, you would have come home. You would have quit your studies. You would have spent the rest of your life trying to pay us back, and you would never have become the man you were meant to be. Your mother and I talked about it every night for a month after we sold the house." every night, and we decided together. We decided that the only real gift we could give you was a life that did not know what it had cost. He turned to look at Jonathan then. The light was low, but Jonathan could see his father's face clearly. You became that man, son. You did what we hoped. That is our reward. We do not need another one. Jonathan could not speak. His father put a hand on his shoulder. The house you brought us. In the envelope. It is a beautiful gift, son, but it is not for us. It is for you. You needed to bring it. We understand. Keep it. Use it. Live in it. Bring your children to visit us here, one day. That is all we want. Jonathan sat with his father in the dark for a long time. He had come home to lift his parents out of poverty. He was beginning to understand that they had never been poor. The land came back first. Peter Achebe worked quietly, the way Jonathan had asked. The family who owned the old brick house had grown children of their own now, and when Peter approached them with an offer generous enough to buy something better in a nicer part of town, they agreed within a week. The 2 hectares of farmland were harder. 3 different owners across 19 years. But money, when it is patient and quiet, opens most doors, and by the end of the 3rd month, every parcel of the ground Jonathan's grandfather had left to his father was back in the Bell name. Jonathan did not tell his parents any of this. Not yet. The gold was slower. The goldsmith in town was long dead, but his son had inherited the shop and kept careful records, and he was willing to help. Piece by piece, month by month, Peter tracked what could be tracked. Some pieces had been melted down years ago and were gone forever. Others had passed through 3 or 4 hands and were now in other cities, other countries. Jonathan wrote letters. Jonathan made phone calls. Jonathan paid, in some cases, 4 and 5 times what a piece was worth. He recovered 11 of the 16. The rest he had a jeweler in the Capitol remake, working from the small pencil drawings in the old ledger, so that when the set was complete again, it would be as close to what his mother had once worn as human hands could make it. He did not tell her. He did not tell anyone. He built on the old land the following year. Not a mansion, a proper house. 3 bedrooms, a wide porch, a kitchen his mother could stand in without bending, a garden where a mango tree was already taking root because Jonathan had planted a seedling the day the foundation was poured. And at the back of the garden, beyond the vegetable beds, he did something the builders questioned him about more than once. He had the shack moved. Every plank, every rusted sheet of iron, the small iron bed, the wooden table, the shelf with its 4 plates and 3 cups, the framed graduation photograph, all of it carefully dismantled and rebuilt in the garden of the new house, exactly as it had stood at the edge of the quarry. His mother wept when she saw it. Jonathan. Why? Because this is where you raised me a second time, Mama, even when I did not know it. I do not want to forget. She did not argue. She only walked into the shack and stood in the middle of the small room and touched the frame of the graduation photograph as if she were greeting an old friend. Jonathan was married 18 months later. The wedding was small, held on the old land, under a canopy his father had helped design. Edward sat in the front row in a suit that fit him properly for the first time in years. Linda sat beside him in a dress the color of soft blue, her white hair pinned up, her hands folded in her lap. Her hands were bare. They had been bare for 19 years, and she had long since stopped noticing. Toward the end of the ceremony, before the final blessing, Jonathan's bride stepped away from him and walked to Linda. She knelt in front of the old woman. She opened a small velvet box. Linda looked down, and her breath caught. The earrings shaped like teardrops, the thin chain with a single pendant, the 2 bracelets, the wedding bangle. Every piece she had signed away in a goldsmith's ledger 19 years ago, and the few that had been remade so faithfully she could not tell the difference. Jonathan's bride took Linda's bare hands, one at a time, and slid the bangle onto her wrist. "Mother," she said softly. "Welcome home." Linda looked past her, at Jonathan. He was already crying. She did not tell him to stop.